Good evening. Um, we have now presented to you 3 years worth of data, 22-23 and 23-24. That was done in September of this school year. And now we have all of 24-25. The September data only covered the high school because that is where the complaint in the summer of 2024 was focused. As you heard, that complaint alleged very toxic, hostile district school-wide environment filled with systemic racism by allowing white students to continually subject African American students to racially charged forms of bullying and harassment daily. I would say what is consistent in the 3 years worth of data, looking specifically at the high school and very specifically to this complaint, there were let's see, 6, 5, and 7, I believe, white students who made racially inappropriate remarks at the high school. I may have the numbers a little, it's either 6, 5, and 7, but 22, 23, 24, 25, and 25, 26.
Can you say that again? I mean, how many,
Yes.
how many people?
So this complaint says that white students are continually harassing black or African American students on a daily basis. Very specific to this complaint, when you look at the number of high school students who were actually in this data, there were 5, 7, and 6 respectively for those 3 years who are in the data. The complaints may or may not have been about black or African American students. They could have been something else. So we looked at the data. We took it very seriously. You can see in this particular report, many of the things that we wrote down on paper is what the high school and the middle schools have done on a daily, on an annual basis, trying to prevent the forms of racial discrimination, harassment that are alleged in this complaint that we were looking at. So these things are going to continue. They're going to continue on an annual basis. But what we found in the data really doesn't support the complaint. So I don't know what happened 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. We didn't really go back that far to look. My guess is our data would show something very similar since we have 3 years of data. So from our perspective, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the data. But we do not plan on continuing to do this reporting in coming years.
What do you have?
Brianna, your mic's not on.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. I can.
Wonderful, thank you. So for this, when you were tracking this, how was this tracked? Like what data system or what were you using to track it? Is it just by whatever the teachers or, like a principal told you guys? What system were you using?
It goes into Infinite Campus is the reporting system. So teachers will draft a referral or aides or school counselors or whomever witnessed the incident. If it's a student, they would go to a teacher, and likely they would then end up in the AP's office doing the reporting.
And so, I think a big part of this is, while it shows that we do have some reported, right? I think there's a lot of incidents where kids aren't comfortable with it or it's just not talked about, right? So do we have safe spaces for that? Do we talk about these things pretty consistently? Do we make kids feel like it's okay to come and report it? Because I think while our data says that, as a parent in this district, I personally know that, there are things that Logan, my child, has not been comfortable with just telling his teacher. So what do we do to make those spaces, I think is my question. So is it talked about?
Yes, so if you go back to the bullet points on page 1, you can see specifically what the high school did in speaking with all students, speaking with all staff on multiple occasions. The the students have access to school counselors that they could go to, or just a teacher they may have for blue time, gold time, whatever the high school calls it.
But if we're not going to keep track of anything, what's the point?
No. We're going to keep tracking the data. We don't plan on presenting this to the school board in future years
Then what's the point of keeping track of it?
because we keep track of it in the system. It's been there we keep track of all referrals. There's no school district that I'm aware of that does this type of reporting that we just did. We did it for a very specific complaint. The data that we found doesn't substantiate the complaint in any way, shape, or form.
So it's from the comments, it is all based off of high school, but when you show us the report, elementary students, the numbers are obscene. Middle school, it still happens there. What are we doing to start from the bottom, right? Because it gets to the high school. So what are we doing down here? Because we're training the high schoolers who are already, have gone through these things, have learned, these are learned behaviors, right? What are we doing to address it when they're young?
Can I speak to that, Troy?
Yeah.
So since I came in November, one of the things that that I have done and worked directly with our elementary principals on what the reporting process for that looks like for them. I've met with a number of our principals when events have occurred. We've brought those students, whether we've had a consequence for those students or not. I would say 99.9% of those things ended in consequence. They also ended in pre-expulsion meetings where families had to come in and meet with me directly to discuss really what the expectations were moving forward and what the outcomes would be if behavior like that continued. I recently, I don't want to say recently, but I also we had a concern at one of our elementary schools where incidences were repeatedly occurring. Wasn't with a ton of students, but there were a handful of students where these issues were occurring. So I met directly with that entire building, at least that fourth grade group of kids where the concern was coming from, and directly spoke to each one of those kids as groups about what our expectations were from a district perspective, really what that looked like to be a good citizen, the idea of how to report that information to their teachers or to a trusted adult in each one of those buildings, or at least at that building specifically. So the conversation is for me to go back. The expectation is I'll go back and have that meeting this coming year with that entire building. But that is a part of our principal meeting coming up this summer where we will discuss me going into those buildings directly and having conversations with those students directly about what our building expectations are around that, specifically at the elementary level, because I agree with you that if we're seeing high percentages of things happening at the elementary, then that's where we need to start.
Perfect. That was my next question. So
Can I just ask a question real quick? Do you bring the parents in on those? I mean, because we know developmentally, like the elementary kids, a lot of times they repeat things that they say without understanding the weight of what they're saying. So we're also bringing the parents in on those meetings?
Yeah, so we met with every one of those families, so there was an expectation. I'm not going to lie, sometimes there were a lot of pushback from parents wanting to come in and speak directly to me about what occurred because of exactly what you said, and that a lot of families stated, well, my child doesn't understand what that means or what that is. As I explained to those families, that doesn't negate the fact that it was wrong, and there has to be some consequence and an expectation of your child returning to our schools of what our expectation will be moving forward. So we've met with those families. I've spoken with a lot of those families, the victims of those insults or those slurs, their families. Those families were given updates by me, sent letters from me directly about what the outcomes were of that and what the expectation was moving forward, and that they could reach out directly to me if they continued or their child continued to have concerns about incidents occurring in the building.
Andre, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm looking at the data, and the question is, are we having an effect as you go from elementary to middle school to high school? and I'm looking as far as the numbers, Caucasian are 23 white in elementary. Then we get to the middle school, then there were 19, but when we get to the high school, it's 6 as far as offending, you know? So that says to me, as I look at the data, that we are having some effect from elementary as we go through and talk about the sensitivity with, you know, with the groups as we go in, as they go through their own educational journey. Because it's significantly lower in high school from what it was elementary, and you can see that progression.
Yeah, I can't, you know, I think that, again, I've been here for 1 year, so I can't speak to what has been happening over the last 5 to 10 years. What I'll say is that from a collective standpoint, that the administrators in those buildings, the support staff in those buildings, as of the last year, have taken a very kind of streamlined approach to this and are not straying away from those conversations with their students and with their families. So I expect that these things will hopefully continue to go down. Again, and it goes back to what Brianna said earlier, it is still about ensuring that we're building safe spaces for children to report incidences as they occur. I don't think that happens overnight, especially if folks have an experience that has been negative. But I think that as long as we keep building those goals and putting that work forward with our teachers and with our principals from an expectation standpoint, that you will see the continuation of this of students willing to report it, and hopefully of these things going down. I don't think we can guarantee, again, that it won't happen, right? It's definitely probably going to happen. Unfortunately, we live in a society where these things do occur, but it is about the way in which we address them as a district, head on, and not kind of put our head in the sand, and we address them when they happen. We have those tough conversations with the families of the students who are engaging in that behavior. We're delivering behavioral outcomes when those things do happen, and we're documenting. So I think what Troy is saying is, although he's saying we may not, you know, bring this data directly to the board anymore, that documentation will still occur. One, because it legally has to. We do have to present that data to DPI every year, so that data collection will still occur. That submission of that data will still occur, and we'll continue to increase the work that we're doing on the ground floor and engaging students in the conversation around how to be great citizens in a community such as Oak Creek.
Hey, Andre, several parents just reached out to me as going through the year on this, is that they feel comfortable talking about safe spots, places, the Speak Up app via telephone and email. Are we collecting data utilizing that because they're comfortable calling someone they don't know, and they feel like they can explain how they feel, and so I just didn't know if we're still.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that data. Anytime a kid submits anything to Speak Up, Speak Out, it comes to me directly.
Okay.
So I go through that specifically around anything related to bullying and harassment that comes through.
Yeah.
So we are looking at that. A lot of the middle school data that we have gotten has come from that app, or at least it was submitted to the app, and then our principals did the research behind it. But you're right, a lot of the middle schoolers are using Speak Up, Speak Out. Yeah. Some of the high schoolers are utilizing. No one in elementary that I've seen is utilizing it at this point, but it is basically being used by our middle schoolers and high schoolers, and more of our middle schoolers than anything else.
I have two things.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I've been waiting. I have two things I'd like to say. One is I'm actually pretty sure I know which elementary school and which grade school teacher you talked to, and I received a lot of feedback on that maybe we can talk about some other time. My question is, some parents, there was a letter sent to every parent in that classroom, even if if their child was spoken to, even if they weren't in the actual event.
No, so when I mean that I sent a letter to families, I didn't send a letter to families, every student when I came in directly.
But you spoke to an entire class.
But I spoke to the entire class of students, yes.
I would really suggest that in the future, an email or a message goes out for that, because I think you would have received more complaints, to be honest with you. I think that a lot of parents didn't know until after the fact, end of the school year, but heard that some of these students are repeat offenders, or there's been other things. So I just think that we should communicate with every person, because it's a special thing when you get to come in, just like when Mr. Dan comes in, it's something kind of exciting. But when it has something that parents should know about, parents maybe don't need to know if Dan reads a weather book, but they should probably know, hey, this is going on in your kid's class. So that's just
my 2 cents because I did receive a lot of feedback on that. The second thing that I will ask, and just being devil's advocate, is that, so you're mentioning that we're not going to give this report anymore because there's no need, but it's required to have this data. Well, then, I mean, then why do we still get the report for like emergency, like how many fire drills and stuff? Like, I mean, shouldn't we still be getting those reports? We obviously have at least some community members who are interested in this, so I think that we should be giving it to those community members. And maybe it doesn't need to be monthly, but can't we, I mean, if we're getting the emergency preparedness ones quarterly, why not this?
At least for, I mean, at least for a while yet, until we see some more consistent patterns that, yes, things are improving. And you're right, it's never going to go away. But until we see some more consistency that we are in this like leveling pattern, if that's what we are in, or I just would like to see a little bit more consistency as to where we are, so we don't have to have this reported. I mean, you're right, we are documenting it, it's state required, but I would just like to see this still come back to the board.
Yeah, I think
just for a while.
I think my concern with not bringing that back is that our goal is to start putting and implementing and having these interventions, correct, so that we see a change and that we see the change in the behavior. But we don't know if it's working or not with what we're doing if we're not seeing data. So I think even if it was just once a year, I think an annual report of where we sit would be nice, just so we know that we're putting in these interventions and we're doing these things to make the kids feel safe and comfortable and in a good environment. So shouldn't we have evidence of that we can give back?
I think like end of the year, school year makes sense, right? And so it gives us a whole year perspective. And if we have to talk about, strategies, guidance, provide whatever plans or even resources, additional resources, then we strategize that for the beginning of next school,
Well, if that's the board's wishes, then we can go back and review that and then take a look at when it would be appropriate to bring a report back to the board, if it's at the end of the year or whatever.
Yep.
And then my other question is in regards to that, again, as far as interventions. So do we have anything, because again, we go back to, it starts at elementary, right? So do we have any social emotional learning interventions or programs that we're using already to address this? So when it's there, we know what to do and the teachers know what to do and we're already discussing it?
Yeah, I mean, that was, there were portions of part of the second step SEL curriculum that they've been using for years. So that's always been, I don't know how long the district has been using it, but they've been using that for years as far as I know. Obviously, we're moving towards Character Strong for next year, and that is also in the Character Strong SEL curriculum as well. So we'll continue to utilize that SEL curriculum as a part of that. But I think, from the work that you and I are looking to do, Brianna, we can also look at how we build out what we're currently using and what we currently have access to, what else may be out there, and what else we could do to support those conversations at the elementary, middle, and high level.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then I think I just have one more. Go ahead, Dan.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Andre said. So yeah, last month you had some presentations that were made about Character Strong, and then the second step was originally adopted in the district by 2020. As it was starting to sunset, we had a group of counselors come together along with some district office staff to review, do we want to continue with second step? Do we want to look at something that might be a little more germane to our work? So we have adopted through an action item moving forward with Character Strong, and that really focuses on our elementary and middle school students.
I think one big question I have is, so when we do these restorative practices, right, when these incidents happen, I know that we want to restore that relationship between the children, but before that happens, do we take into consideration the victim, and do we make sure that they have like counseling and the things that they need ahead of time before you even put the two in a room? Because I know from, again, experience, Logan was put in a room way before he was ready to do restorative, the restorative action, which I understand, and we want that, right? But I think we need to consider the child first. So I just don't know if there's been a change since then.
Well, I'll just be honest. I've not been a part of any type of restorative incidents at this point. A lot of that is because a number of our victim families have requested that not happen at that point in time. So, and I've always had the conversation and let parents know when they feel their child is ready, then we can hold those meetings, and that they can let me know when they want to do that. So at this point, that hasn't happened. I'm trained in that specifically, and I've always been an advocate of not putting kids in a room when they're not ready to be put in a room together, and ensuring that in order for this to happen, that everyone involved is prepared for what that looks like. One of the things we probably should look at doing is ensuring that everyone from a specific elementary and middle school is effectively trained in restorative practices before we do kind of a full-out implementation of that, because I'm just not 100% sure that is the case at the elementary and secondary level, that everyone is specifically our support staff is who typically would do something like that, and maybe in a smaller building like our elementary schools, and maybe an administrator. But I can tell you that from most districts I've been to, that a lot of folks aren't trained in restorative practices. So before you put children in a room, you definitely should, everyone in the room should be trained and have a clear understanding of what that meeting is going to look like.
Absolutely. And just off of that, so if you do have an incident like this, what are the teachers taught what to do when microaggressions happen, when a kid is called a slur? I know they have some form of training, but is there like a scripting that they have or something that is like, if this happens, this is what you do?
There are conversations that have happened, that have been had prior, like I said, prior to me getting here. So yes, they have a little knowledge of what that looks like. Again, there's a lot more work that goes into that, especially when you're talking about microaggressions and identifying and recognizing what they are. A lot of folks have never heard of that term. So to think that the majority of our teachers know how to recognize a microaggression when they see one, I think that would be, we'd be over the top even suggesting that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work, Brianna, at the end of the day that goes with that training piece too. And those are things that, like I said, I think that you and I will continue kind of to work on, and what that will look like as we move forward in that work as well. But I don't disagree with that. I just think that, when we talk about microaggressions, that is a huge conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.